Welcome to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. We've got stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your business. Today, my guest is the owner of Cypress Point Gymnastics, coach of 32 collegiate scholarship winners, women's program director for NGA, and redfish tournament angler, Brian Neal. Welcome to the show, Brian. I want to dive into sort of a brief biography of who Brian Neal is. I know you, but we need to get our audience to figure out who this guy is. So tell us how you got started in gymnastics. Were you a gymnast? I mean, talk about little Brian and all the stuff. Don't leave out any of the good stuff.
the details. All right. So my parents put me in gymnastics when I was very small. Just to develop total athletic ability for other sports. There was no real men's gymnastics in the area other than the beginning levels. And I enjoyed it, ended up transferring to a gym that had a competitive team at LSU with Armando Vega for a short time. And then junior high football tryouts were right next to the cheerleader tryouts. And I graduated very quickly away from the gymnastics team and, moved on.
Onto the football team because of the cheerleaders. Now, little did you know that you could have been involved in gymnastics and still had a connection to the cheerleaders. When I was in high school, we had high school gymnastics. You and I talked about that at lunch today. And in my gymnasium, the men's gymnastics equipment was on the balcony on either side of where like the basketball court was and whatever. Right. And the cheerleaders, when it was raining, worked out in there. And you wouldn't believe how much better all of us got or how hot it suddenly got in that gym where we needed to take our shirts off as it did on a rainy day when the cheerleaders were downstairs. So I relate slightly to that. Not that the cheerleaders were giving me the time of day. When I was in high school, true story, I wasn't 5 foot tall until I was 15 years old and weighed about 105 pounds at that point. So cheerleaders didn't know I existed.
Well, I was this height in the 7th grade and never grew another inch.
Which is why you went and played football in the 7th grade, because gymnastics was going to be hard on you. So you went from football guy to, hey, those cheerleaders are hot, to a guy that suddenly was recruited to start spotting gymnastics. That had to be a rude awakening. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us if there was any culture shock or weird happenings in sort of your early coaching career. I'm sure you got some stories.
Yeah, so the goal for me all through college and all through high school was to be a basketball football coach. And basically, I was doing a lot of coaching for free, and I got a phone call from the local gym that I had been in as a kid and said, well, you want to be a coach? Will you come coach for us? And I said, man, sure, So for $3.13 an hour, I showed up to the first day of work.
People, you need to understand that was minimum wage when he and I were kids, man. My first job slinging hot dogs was for $3.15 an hour, and I was glad to get it.
Yes, indeed. And as crazy as it is, on my first day, the head coach had plans to make a change in his life. So without telling anybody, he showed me how to spot a souk on vault and a double back on floor and bars.
Your first day?
First day.
Your first day, all right.
Yeah, and he never showed back up. So from that point on, I was learning on the fly.
He never showed back up?
No, that was the only day. He took another job, and he was gone. And thank goodness for the United States Elite Coaches Association and all those old grainy Russian videos.
Tom and I talked about that in last month's episode. We talked about how both of us had memberships to that and the old VHS tapes that you put in there. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tom said he spent the extra money to get the slow-mo ungrainy stuff. And I joked with him. I was like, well, that's because you worked for yourself and could afford the slow motion ones. I worked for somebody else at that point and had to.
Yeah. Just happy to get whatever they would put there for us to study and start learning from. So, yeah, absolutely. But no, that was 1989. And I've been a full-time coach from that day on. So it's all I've ever done.
Awesome. Have any funny stories or any crazy stuff that happened to you early on that maybe made you question, like, what am I doing here?
Lots, 33 years, lots of fun stuff that's went down. I had a really cool one where we had a big group of older kids, and the girls, as all, kids do, start talking about stuff that's a little inappropriate. And one of the older coaches pulled all the kids aside and said, hey, look, girls, we've got to stop all these sexual innuendos during practice. And kids all looked kind of puzzled, and I wasn't even really there for that particular part of the conversation. And that night, as I'm cleaning up the gym, the phone rings, and one of the dads is like in a panic. Sarah just got home and said somebody was having sex in the window. What's going on up there? And I'm like,
Sex in the window.
sexual innuendos. So so we've learned a lot along the way how to speak to kids, and just many wonderful athletes and fun times in the gym for sure.
All right, you got a poop story you got to tell, because your poop story is going to lead into my poop story. I don't think there's a gymnastics coach out there that doesn't have a poop story. But
so
drop it on us, Brian.
So again, just started coaching, and as a young guy in the gym, you're kind of mindful of all the little girls and stuff. So teacher that was training me to be a coach, I'm walking out. She's in the front of the line leading the class to the first event, and I'm in the back of the line, and I kind of hear a little thumping noise, like a little thunk, and what was that noise? Didn't really register on me too much. So we take a couple more steps, and I hear another little thump.
Oh no!
So I start looking, and one of the little girls in line has all these little round balls of poop in her leotard, and young guy, all kind of signals of shock and oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I'm trying to come up with the right words to tell the teacher that there's a problem. And at that exact second, the little boy right in front of me looks at me and says, "I stepped in a brownie." So at that point, I grabbed him and the little girl, and I took off for the office to get some help.
Wait,
and
was it a brownie with nuts?
Make matters worse, behind me was the next I stepped in a brownie.
Oh no!
So I ended up with two little boys and the little girl with the brownie problems on their feet. So yeah.
That's awful. All right, this definitely won't one up you, but I was coaching like a little boys training team, and this was early in my days of coaching too. And we all know, if you've ever coached boys, the bucket for pommel horse, right? You got a bucket tied to a rope, tied to a swivel in the ceiling, and your guys do little circles in the thing. And for the life of me, I can't figure out, why do I keep getting this crap smell wafting in front of my face, and other boys are going, "It kind of smells," or other coaches are going, "It kind of smells over here." Well, it's time to, it's been our 3 minutes or whatever at the station, and I'm like, rotate. And if the buckets aren't, it doesn't have 3 points of contact, they sometimes tip over. And when this bucket tips over, 4 or 5 little Tootsie Rolls come rolling out of there, because this boy was in his sweatpants in the bucket, pooped his pants, and because he was at that angle like this, they had all trickled down to the bottom of his pants and landed in the bottom of the bucket. And then I got my answer as to why there were Tootsie Rolls all over the floor, and it smelled like that. All right, let's move on to maybe some more serious stuff. You and I, we're friends, but I think it's important for you to understand that I consider you one of the good guys in the sport, because you've always struck me as a coach who went about gymnastics excellence, but different than maybe the ways than traditional old school gymnastics coaches went about getting excellence. And I really appreciate that. It's a lesson that took me a few more years than it took you to learn. And I've apologized already on the first 2 podcasts, like, hey, I was young and made some mistakes. But you and I, we've talked, and you and I both coach relationally, right? We both think that for us personally, not that it's the only way, but the way that we get the most enjoyment from coaching is engaging our athletes on a relational level. And as a result, we have these lifelong relationships with some kids that we've coached like 30, 35 years ago. So if you got a story or two you want to share about, maybe think about a kid that you really enjoyed coaching, and talk to us about that kid or 2 or 3. You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. Do you feel like you're alone and on an island because gymnastics businesses face unique challenges and you're throwing mud at a wall to see what sticks? How would you like to have Ken Harris or Tom Forrester in one-on-one private sessions as your business mentor? Check out the Iron Business Solutions Gold Medal Business Package on the web for more information. Link in the description.
There's always that group of kids. There's the first group of kids that you just fall in love with the sport, and then there's that first group of kids that maybe your first homeschool group, or your first group that they all go to level 8 together. Well, I had that first homeschool group, and In that group, one of the athletes invented a release move, and it's named after her today. But one of the other girls,
Wait, say her name.
Rachel Frenzella. So if you look, it's the Frenzella.
Tell us, describe. These are gymnastics
Yeah.
people. What's a Frenzella?
So the Frenzella would be a Corkina hecht out of an upright handstand instead of out of a front giant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she was I mean, just had the most beautiful upright handstand, and we at the time, we were training Corkina hecks with a few other kids, and said, Rachel, try these drills in this grip, and everything worked really well. And a month later, she does it at her first meet and qualified to nationals, competed at nationals, and we all got the plaques.
What was the assigned difficulty value back then?
D.
D.
D. Yeah,
All right.
it's still a D today, I believe.
Still a
so,
D?
Yeah. But in that group, I had a young lady named Rachel Delahousie, and Rachel was that smart kid, that anything you thought, she thought. She understood your thinking behind it. It went really one of those kids that you just clicked with, and she ended up at Alabama on their gym team. I believe she was a national champion at the University of Alabama, and then after she had graduated, I kind of lost track with her, and somewheres along the line, my grandfather had to have an emergency surgery for some cancer that was on the top of his head, skin cancer turning into some more serious cancers. And I knew Rachel had been in medical school, but really had no idea where she was at or what she was doing. So my grandfather passed away 2, maybe 3 times in that surgery when the doctors or the nurses come running out. It's going really bad. We've given him a bunch of blood. He's in a bad place. So as a family, we had been through the ringer all day long. It was an emotional day where we were just expecting the worst. And then finally, after about 6 hours of surgery, the nurse comes in and says, he's kind of made it through it. It's been a long day. One of the doctors is fixing to come in and give y'all an update. So as we're sitting there, the door opens and Rachel Delahousie walks in the door. And
wow.
it was the most just surreal moment of my life, just to sit there and think the kid that I had homeschooled, picked her up at her house back before all the world changed, and brought her to gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, and went through all those years of training with this kid, had turned around and had been the doctor that had saved my grandfather's life multiple times that day. So
awesome.
It
awesome.
Definitely just it hit me in my heart in a way that nothing else had ever hit me at that time. So but there's there's kids that change us. There's kids that they are the kid for that time that brings you as a coach into that time. There was I had a kid, Kara Strickland. She was an Auburn gymnast, and Kara was the kid that when I was trying to make the sport fun for my children, my daughters, she would be at the door at the end of practice every night saying, "Hey, I didn't get everything done that I needed to get done today. You have to do better tomorrow because I have goals in this sport. I want to be a college gymnast. You have to do better tomorrow." And
wow.
Like
a kid holding you accountable.
Yeah, I loved it because for me, I felt like I was tiptoeing through the sport at that time. My own children were there. There were all the repercussions of going home with your children that you love so much and them not being happy. So she was the kid that kept me accountable and brought me into that particular frame of mind for that day and age to be a good coach.
So I'll talk about 3 kids, and I'll sort of make this a timeline of Ken Harris coaching. One at the very beginning of coaching, this kid had a huge impact on me, and at the time in her life, I think I had the same on her. One from the middle and one from the end of my coaching career. And the first one, the beginning one, it lives down by you in. I'm pretty sure she's in Baton Rouge at Centenary, which is where she ended up doing gymnastics. This kid I met, I was coaching a little team group in a gym I didn't own, and the rec kids were vaulting right next to where the team bars were. And this kid was 5 years old, and it was her turn, and she wasn't paying attention, and this 10-year-old girl walks into place so that she can take a vault. And as soon as the 5-year-old kid sees that, she wraps her in a bear hug, picks her up, turns around, marches 5 steps, sets her down and says, "It's my turn," and then runs down and vaults. Well, as soon as I see a kid that's that tough, I go, I got to have that kid in my training group. So she comes back down, and I said, "Hey, you're a real Spitfire, aren't you?" Well, she goes home and tells her mom that a coach called her spitwad that night. So I had to have a conversation with the gym owner. Hey, why are you calling kids that you don't even coach a spitwad? And I was like, not spitwad, not spitwad, Spitfire, Spitfire. Because this is what she did. And by the way, Mrs. Carlton, I'd really like to invite Lauren into my little Hot Shots training group. And we did, and then I coached this kid forever. She did gymnastics at Centenary. And by the way, because I had called her Spitfire and there was the whole joke about Spitwad, her nickname was Spitty. So all of her teammates, all of the coaches in the gym called her Spitty for forever. In fact, to this day, we call her Spitty. She came back after she graduated and she worked for me for a few years and she coached team, and all the girls called her Coach Spitty. The one from the middle, this is where like the relational stuff really gets going. This kid, and I'm going to try not to say her name because I don't want any bad, because she had some circumstances in her life. When she was very young, her parents went through a messy divorce and her mom had some mental health issues. And so this kid was in my, and I think I told you this, but it's worth the audience members knowing. The way my wife and I used to coach is we'd have a group of optionals and we'd get them to like that sort of like level 9, 10, and then we'd go down and we'd start a group of little babies. So we always had two groups going on in the gym, an optional group and a babies group that was coming up. Sometimes the babies would be, level 7s, but that's what the babies group. Well, anyway, I've got this kid and she's 5 years old, and Mom and Dad are going through a divorce. Mom's life is not very well put together. And in fact, at some point in her teen years, Mom had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for 3 weeks, and that was a mess. But back to when this kid was 5, I always had a policy that you needed to arrive at the meet site ready to go 15 minutes prior to general stretch of your session. And ready to go means your hair's put up, you're in your leotard, you're in your warm-ups, your grips are in your bag, you're waiting to walk out on the floor. And we're 15 minutes into general stretch and this kid isn't here yet. And she comes running in and is bawling hysterical. And I put my arms out like this as if to say, hey, Lily, what's wrong? Because she's bawling hysterical. And she takes it to mean, like, jump up in my arms. I'm going to hold you right now because you're crying. So she jumps up, wraps her arms around my neck, her legs around my waist, puts her face on my chest and just starts sobbing. And I kind of turn to my wife like, what's happening here? I'm like, they're there, sweetheart. They're there. But from that moment, I kind of realized what I meant in this kid's life. And so we fast forward all the way to what is her last meet ever. She's not a superstar gymnast, so her last meet is going to be level 9. She's not going to make regional, so it's going to be level 9 state. And when kids get to that age and stuff, we relax a little bit on our rules, like, hey, you got to make this many routines to be able to compete. And so we were training a front for this kid on vault, and she about 1 in 5 would make, and hadn't made one in a competing at a meet all year long. And now we're at state. We go through the entire warm-ups. By the way, we're flight B, and our first event was bar, so our very last event is vault. We're the last people in the last session of the day compete, and I have 8 or 9 level 9s in this rotation, and she's third to last to go. Couldn't have written a better script. Doesn't make any vaults in warm-up. Competes her first vault, sits it down. Goes down for her second one, and you could just see in her face, this kid is going, I'm making this vault for Coach Ken. And dude, I'm telling you, she does the same exact thing that she's done on all the vaults, except by some miracle, her butt stays about 2 inches off that 8-incher. And instead of just standing up and presenting and turning and presenting again, she leaps up and presents and immediately sprints over to Coach Ken and jumps up in my arms like she did when she was 5. Wraps her arms around me, starts sobbing like she did when she was 5. And the whole meet was held up for like 10 minutes. 2 of the vault judges were crying, and like everybody knew what was going on. And we still had 2 more kids that had to finish the meet and whatever. And then the final one is this kid. She's at the University of Georgia right now. And my wife used to call her One More because this kid always wanted to do one more. Like if you said, all right, it's time, girls, it's time to go to vault, get your grips off, get a drink, get to vault. she'd be like, Coach Ken, one more. Can I do one more of these? And it was like that on every event. And this was just this kid was homeschooled her entire career all the way through high school and everything, and was really sharp, like witty, and a kid that I could be sassy with and she'd get sassy back. And so we just had this sort of cool bond. And the reason I tell all these stories is I think our style of coaching enables us to get more out of kids, because Mary Lee said that the relationship you have with the kids is equal to the amount of trust the kids have in you, and the more your athlete trusts you, the more they'll do for you. Now, I know plenty of very successful high-level coaches that aren't relational at all. They're just like, "Hey, I'm just a gymnastics coach and whatever." I can't exist that way. Like life would be too boring. I might as well go work for State Farm and sit in a cubicle or whatever. I don't know. Do you have a kid in mind that maybe taught you as much in life or as much about coaching as you ended up teaching them?
Yeah, there's several kids along those lines. I think we've all got that kid. And for me, it was a young lady named Amanda Morales that she's on her rec team. And as she was brought to my attention to be evaluated for team, my first impression was didn't look athletic, didn't look like any kid that you would ever have picked out of a group. But I took the time to watch her that day. And from that day until the day that she moved on, through college, she taught me that natural talent would never beat the kid that just worked her butt off.
Hmm.
And she was that kid that, like you're talking about, that one more kid,
Yeah.
Amanda ended up being the JO national champion on vault. There was multiple times she went into the elite program. Technique magazine wrote an article on her vault. She did a Cuervo at JO nationals, and I think she was the only Cuervo that year. So she was the kid that always inspired me. That it came from her heart to do the work to get there instead of the natural talent. And that there's lots of kids along the way that make that impression on you. There's kids who uh, everybody says, well, do you have favorites? No, you don't have favorites,
Sure.
but you have the kid that makes the correction versus the kids that and it looks like that kid's your favorite. Well, Mo was that kid that you just couldn't help but love her because she put the work in and earned every single thing that she did.
You said favorites, and I always told my team parents I do have favorites. I said, the way I explained it is, listen, I'm a human and you're a human. I might like chocolate ice cream, you might like vanilla ice cream. I might like sausage, you might like pepperoni, right? We can't help what we prefer. And me, when I coach, I'm constantly telling poop jokes, fart jokes. That's who if your kid thinks that's dumb,
Right.
then she's not going to bond with me, which is cool. But if your kid thinks that stuff is hilarious, she and I are going to bond. Now, where I would draw the line and talk to the parents about is I'm going to coach the kid that thinks poop and farts aren't funny as hard as I'm going to coach the kid that thinks they are funny. They're going to get the same amount of turns. They're going to get the same amount of respect and whatever. But if you're looking out there and I'm cutting up with this kid all the time and hardly ever cutting up with your kid, it's because your kid rolls her eyes every time I make a fart noise, and this kid laughs
Yeah.
hysterically when I do. So I do have favorites. But what you pay for is the gymnastics instruction.
Right.
And as long as the gymnastics instruction is on the same level, then I think it's okay as humans for us to understand that we have
Well, I think you
favorites.
make a very good point there, though. Like you're not going to say the right thing for the right kid every time, but that kid that clicks, you're going to say it less times and they're going to move on.
Yeah.
But you don't quit saying it for the other kids. You don't change.
Yeah, so when
You
they're up
keep
on the bars and
working.
the kid
Yeah.
that gets you can be like, "Hey, straighten your legs, fart sniffer," and then she's going to straighten her legs. And you say it to the other kid and she's like, "Why are you calling me a fart sniffer?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm kidding, but
Yeah, but no, there's always that kid that their personality meshes with what you're trying to do that day.
right? And
And
so it comes across as a preference,
yeah,
which parents may think, hey, that's favoritism. And to a degree, it's favoritism, but it's not the favoritism they're talking about.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So we talk about kids that we had that taught us more than we taught them. So I'm going to talk about this kid, Kaylee McDonald. And this kid was a freak in terms of gymnastics talent. She had it in spades. And she used tears to cope with anxiety. But I was young and didn't understand this and like sort of had a rule, hey, we don't cry in practice, right? Like 'cause that was the rule we all had back then. And it's important to note that her crying was never rescue crying. It's not like she would start sobbing, hoping somebody would say, "Oh, 5 bar routines is too much for you, Kaylee. Come on over here." It would just be like a little tear down the side of her face, and it didn't matter what I said we were going to do, she'd get the tears. And here's the perfect example. Saturday mornings, my wife didn't like to wake up early, so I always handled Saturday morning practices. And because, the circus put the clowns in charge, what we did on Saturday mornings is we played games for the first hour, usually on trampoline. And it would be games for consequences. And it wasn't consequences like you're punished, but it would be like we'd do something like if the first part of our warm up was run 6 minutes around the floor, we'd play a game of add on with gymnastics rules to it. And the winner got to watch while her friends ran for 6 minutes. And if we had 2 sets of 15 leg lifts as a part of the warm up, we'd play a game of add on. And if you won, you didn't have to do the leg lifts. And we would just go through the first hour, hour and a half of Saturday. So for real, on Saturdays, I'd be like, all right, girls, we're going over to Tramp to play games. And Kaylee would start to cry just a little bit, not sob, not anything. But because I wasn't mature enough and hadn't learned yet that this was just her coping mechanism for how she internalized anxiety, I'd get on her. I'd start yelling at her like, we're playing games. You're crying about playing games. You haven't even lost yet. Like you're probably you win all the time. Why are you crying? Which of course, Brian, would increase her anxiety. So the next Saturday, when we would come in to do trampoline games and I'd announce trampoline games, she'd cry some more because now she had a little anxiety from trampoline games and a little more anxiety because now Ken's going to yell at me about the fact that I'm crying.
Yeah.
So this kid taught me a ton, and what I learned is that kids aren't cookie cutter. You have to coach each kid according to what their specific needs are. And the story I always tell about that is a few years ago, Ryan Roberts was still at Alabama, and he was in a gym recruiting one of our kids, and we were on vault. And we had this kid who was recruitable and whatever, and then we had this little guy. She might have been a junior elite or just hopes at this time. And Ryan asked me, he says, well, what kind of personality does Heather have? And Heather runs down the runway, vaults, does a big vault into the resi or whatever. And I said, well, watch this. I said, Heather, that was garbage. I can't believe you would do that while University of Alabama's in the gym watching you. And she turns to me and says, shut up, Baldy. That was a great vault, and I know it was. And laughs and goes back down the runway. And like it was just like that. And I said, now watch this. And then the other kid, Annabelle, took a turn and did an equally marvelous vault. And with this tone and with this look on my face, I said, Annabelle, I'm disappointed in that turn. And she almost immediately starts to tear up. Her whole countenance changes. And I turned to Ryan and I said, see how different these kids are? And I said, Annabelle, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I was proving a point to this guy. Thankfully, at this point in my career, I already knew that Heather needed different things from me than Annabelle. And in large part, that was because of Kaylee McDonald.
Yeah, I think there's always that kid that expands your ability to be a better coach. You know, the kid who, like you're talking about, there you learn the emotional. There's also the kids that, for me, that helped me become a better coach in the technical side. You said something earlier about cookie cutters, and for a long time, I had a cookie cutter testing program. So, like every summer, everybody going from level 8 to level 9, there were 2 tumbling passes, a front layout front and a full and a half punch front that everybody had to do. Well, I had a young lady. Her name's Gayla Griswold. She's just, I don't know, 7, 8 time All-American at Lindenwood in their last season, unfortunately. And she was so fast twitch that she couldn't do a full and a half punch front without over rotating to her head every single time. So finally, one day, it just dawned on me, quit being a knucklehead, get out of the cookie cutter mode, and let her do a double tuck, And from that day on, I think a year later, she competed a full in and a double layout. you know
Wow.
it was
Wow.
it was that kind of a
Because you learn.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I finally said, wait a minute, look at each one of these kids. Look at these long, thin kids that twist so beautiful, and look at the kids that have the Simone body type that are twisting and flipping at such speed and intensity.
Yeah.
Become the coach that can look at the kid, look at their emotions, look at their physical abilities and talents, and coach them for that instead of just this is the simplest combination. I think for me, we always had a testing program that was very important, and it guaranteed a certain amount of success. If your kids passed the testing, they were going to have a minimal level of success every season. But the testing program, I had learned, was a limiting factor after about level 8 because it really was too cookie cutter.
You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. As a gymnastics club owner, do you set your tuition according to what your competition in the area is charging? Do you wish your program generated more revenue so you could afford to pay you and your staff what you're worth? We have a tuition calculator package that for less than $500 will do a full market analysis, give you your low tolerance, high tolerance, and sweet spot for your tuition, as well as a plan including marketing materials to get your tuition up to market tolerance. Adjust your tuition to charge what you're worth confidently thanks to the tuition calculator package. Check us out on the web for more information. Link in the description.
I even had that kid who was coming back from an injury. Her name was Reagan Corville, and I wasn't coaching her group that day. She was working on her own. She was an elite gymnast at the time who was coming back from an elbow surgery, and the coach with her gave her an assignment on one of her first days back to do 5 Arabian double fronts on the floor, and the caution in me was scared to death. This is too
Sure.
fast. It's too much. And, the lesson I learned that day was talented athletes will take you there a lot of times. And she looked up and smiled after being out from an elbow surgery and walked out to the floor and did 5 Arabian double fronts.
Wow.
And
We all need a kid like that.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
I'd die to have a kid that I could just be like, oh, are you back from injury? Knock out 5 Arabian double fronts on the floor.
Well,
Real fast.
I would probably need medication because the anxiety was pretty high on me for her getting re-injured. But yeah, so there's always been lots of special kids along the way that that mean a lot to you and that teach you and turn you into the coach that you are.
Okay, so I know because we've been talking, there was a moment for you where some really cool stuff. I don't want to steal the thunder on your quote, but I'm going to steal the thunder on your quote. This is Brian's quote, where he said, maturing to the point where I no longer needed my ego to be involved. And I think there's a Cali Campo story here.
Well, there's a lot of Cali Campo stories. Cali is a leotard rep too, so many people in the gymnastics industry. She's at nationals every year.
Great, we'll tag her.
Yeah, so I'll definitely get Cali in here. But so Cali choreographed one of the greatest April Fool's jokes in the history of gymnastics.
Oh, I remember this one.
So this is a good one. So I walked in the gym before practice one day, and at the time we had about 30 optionals. And I walked through the waiting room, and 29 optionals were standing around, kind of sniffing, all looking sad. I'm like, practice hadn't even started yet, girls. What is going on? And
Come on, Kaylee.
Yeah, everybody's like, just won't even look at me. And I'm like, all right, girls, practice is starting. Get out, whatever it is. We're close to regionals. Put all this behind you. Let's go have a good practice. And I ran them all out in the gym. So I was going to go in my office and put my keys down. And outside my office door was Cali Campo, and she's standing there crying. So immediately it hits me.
She was able to,
oh yeah, look,
like cry on a dime like this. Oh,
yes.
what a kid.
So she's a complete actor in this one. She looks at me and says, I really need to talk to you. Like something bad's happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Cali, can this wait? She's like, no, it can't wait. We need to talk. So grabs another adult, went into the office where we had some privacy, and she sits down and she just starts sobbing, just sobbing.
Where did she get this?
Oh, look, it was amazing. I mean, I bought in hook, line, and sinker too.
Girl needs to head to Hollywood.
So we're at the point to where we've got the snot bubbles and the tears. We've got it
She's
all.
really
Yeah,
like,
she is like. So she later admitted to me she was crying from fear that I was going to kill her after the joke went that far. But so needless to say, I'm like, Callie, just stop. Tell me what's wrong. What can I do about it? And I'm like, I, I don't even know where to go, Callie. So I start guessing at things. Did you make bad grades? Did you break up? She just got her driver's license. Did you get in a wreck? And after about 5 minutes, I'm like, practice is starting. I'm starting to get worried. I got to get out there. And she looks up at me through her little hiccuping, crying self and says, I'm pregnant. And, and look, out of everything I had ever assumed I would have to deal with, that wasn't one of them. And the panic that coursed through my body was just like a shock.
mm,
Like I never dreamed the kid would say that. I never dreamed I would be in that position. So of course the first thing out of my mouth was completely idiotic.
how did this happen?
Yeah, yeah. How did it happen? Who's the dad? Like so. Needless to say, that was pretty terrible. So, but we did finally get to the point to where I'm like, all right, Callie, let's calm down. Let's have you talked to your parents? Where are you at in this decision? What's going on? And she just looks at me and says, I haven't told my mom. Will you help me? I'm like, oh my God, no. I don't want your mom thinking anything about me
This
at all.
girl took this joke too far, Brian. This is too. Callie, if you're watching,
Yeah. Oh,
this
yeah.
was too far.
I guarantee you, Callie is laughing. She'll be laughing herself to death because we've laughed this joke over many, many times. It was a good one.
All right, continue.
So about this point, I hear some snickering at the door of my office, and it starts to hit me. Wait a minute. That's her team. And right as it finally hit me, she was getting me. That she had just pulled off the greatest prank ever.
For real.
I jumped up and I opened the door, and all her teammates were standing there, and she hollers, April Fools, I got you. And she took off running. And you would assume that the first thing would have been anger. You would assume that there would have been this, oh my God, I'm so mad. No.
Relief, I bet. You didn't have to talk to her parents.
I didn't have to deal with that situation.
Yeah,
It was
right?
off my hands.
Yeah.
I was thrilled with the outcome of that situation because it wasn't true. So,
Okay,
yeah.
same great kid, later in her career, prom, homecoming. This is where I was
Okay,
going with
yeah,
this
all right.
with this quote,
Yeah.
which is super
So
impressive.
this was a situation to where get a phone call from Callie's mom, and she says, Callie's not going to be at practice tonight. She's sick, not sure what it is, some kind of problem, but we checked her out of school today. She's running a fever. So I walk out to gym, and stretch has just started, and so I walk up to Callie's best friend Rebecca, and I basically just said, look, Rebecca, man, what happened? Callie was great last night. Is she bad sick? And, what's going on? And Rebecca looked up at me and said, Callie's not sick. She took the night off to go shopping for her prom dress. And, it hit me that what I was doing as a coach, the kids were so afraid to tell me the truth that even
Mhm.
their parents were teaching them to lie.
Yeah.
And at that point, I kind of had to look and start making some changes in myself.
Good
And
for you.
yeah, let's be honest. The gymnastics is a short period of your time, but how you communicate and being able to talk with someone, that's the rest of your life. So yeah, no, definitely some things along the lines that at that point later on, that same situation with my daughters, uh, my oldest daughter as a level 9 gymnast in the 8th grade, every year, homecoming and prom wanted to quit gym. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out, okay, this is my fault. I can solve this. And the freshman year in high school, said, okay, you have to take 2 days off for homecoming and you have to take 2 days off for prom. So, well, what do you mean? I said, I want you to grab all of your friends and I want y'all to go dress shopping. And I want you to have the best time ever. I want
Mm.
you to, whatever you want to do. They sent me pictures of probably 75 dresses piled in a dressing room and like 8 little girls in there. Just
Aw.
it was the best day of probably that she had ever skipped gym. And the next day, take your mom, go back, buy your favorite dress from that day, and then take the dance. And so I just kind of made it a rule in the gym after that, for all of my kids. Y'all give me everything I could ever
Mm.
ask for. You work for me, you're dedicated to the sport, you're respectful to me. I'm going to
Man.
respect it back to you that this is a time that it's important for you to get out of the gym and go do those things so that you don't feel like the sport is taking it away from you.
Wow. Wow. How wise. How wise. All right, let's take this in a different direction. Do you have a favorite event to coach? Mine used to be bars. And it was, I think, for the longest time, bars was my favorite event to coach because as a gymnast, I was so terrible at bars. I had to be a real student. I'm going to tell you a true story here. Any of my high school gymnastics buddies will attest to this story. Back when I was doing gymnastics back then, you could eventually specialize. And so my last 3 or 4 years of gymnastics, I was a floor vault and rings specialist. I hadn't touched the high bar in 3 years at least. And the way it worked when you competed for your high school is you put 5 guys up and 4 scores counted on every event. So you had to be one of the top 5 guys for your team to make the lineup on each event. And that was a particular year when we had just graduated a whole bunch of people. And so the size of my team had shrank. And we only had 4 guys to do high bar. And worse, one of those guys was hurt or sick or something. So coach in the middle of warm-ups is saying, what are we going to do? We don't have a 4 score. I was like, I think I got some grips in my bag, coach. He's like, Harris, get your grips on. Let's go. I get no warm-up. I get no nothing. I haven't touched the high bar in years. So I hop up in a reverse grip and I go reverse grip kip. My intention is to go reverse grip kip, cast a handstand, front giant, figure it out. And I go reverse grip kip, but it's so bad I can't do a cast. So I have to pause, readjust my hands. And keep in mind, I haven't thought this through. And I go cast a handstand, front giant. Oh, what am I going to do now? I don't know. So I do a belly buster to a support after the second front giant. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? I don't know. How about some back giant? So I turn my hands around. I cast a handstand. I go back giant. I'm like, oh, there's no freaking way I'm letting go and doing a flyaway off of this thing. So I do a long hang pullover, which includes an extra back hip circle and undershoot. And I'm like, tap swing. I don't want to do a flyaway here. I'm like, tap swing. Still not sure I'm going to do this flyaway. Tap swing, ping off the bar, flyaway that falls to my knees and whatever. And I get up and present, and my final score was literally a 1.2 for a high bar routine I made up on the spot right there. So I was that bad at bars and had to be a real student of bars when I first started. But I would say, honestly, at the end of my career and even now, my favorite event to coach became vault. And it became that as soon as we did the expansion in my main gym where we got some tools on vault because at first the only thing I had was a stupid vault in front of a resi. We didn't have any foam. We didn't have any place to do any drills or whatever. And it was just, it was hard. I couldn't figure it out. And once we got those tools, man, I loved it. I loved going to town over there. So for you, favorite event. And you better have a story. Don't just say an event and then get quiet.
Definitely bars. I think as a coach, bars challenged me in a way that no other event did. Kids come to you as a bars coach, and bars is the only event that is on your hands out of anything in the world. Everything else that any athlete's going to do is going to be grounded from their feet up. Bars is different, so kids are naturally less inclined to be brave. They feel less secure. So being a bar coach from day one gave me the opportunity to see that immediate confidence when kids built confidence in me and that I, was helping them through things. So bars from early on definitely developed the skills for spotting bars.
Hmm,
And I think most of us young coaches, there's a little ego development, confidence
sure.
around just being
Yep.
able to spot basic stuff, and I don't know if there was ever
I like that you said ego development in there because I think that played a huge part in why I wanted to be a good bars coach, why I loved coaching bars. Because in general, you go to these JO optional meets and the cream separates themselves typically on bars.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I was attending a lecture years ago by Mihai Brestian and Alicia Sacramone's coach and Allie Raisman's coach. But this was before Allie came onto the scene as a star. He was doing a conditioning lecture at one of the regional congresses I was at, and I'm going to do my best impression of Mihai Brestian here. And he says, "You all focus on bars. Bars is arms. I don't focus arms. I focus legs. Legs is 3 events. Bars is 1 event. You win bars. I win all around. Right?
Yep.
But so there is truth that like the cream separates itself typically on bars over there, but this guy had it figured out. And clearly he did. He had a couple of Olympians and they were both pretty good.
Well, in the day before pits, you were a participant on bars with your kids. So if you're teaching a release move, you basically were holding an 8-inch mat over your head with another coach when she missed. It became so much more of a personal feeling that you felt like you were a part of the success or a part of the failure.
Sure, sure.
And I'll say this: being a good technical coach is never developed over a pit. You become a
Yep.
good technical coach when you're sitting there trying to figure it out, and every turn has repercussions. And
Yeah.
so I think that challenge really
You
appealed
also
to
get
me.
discernment in a hurry, right? Because you got to decide, is this kid really ready to do this
Yeah,
skill here
yeah,
or not? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, all right. So I know this about you because we talked about it some today at lunch. Um, you had a mentor who was a good mentor. Tell me some profound lesson. First, tell everybody who the mentor was, and
yeah.
then tell us a profound lesson.
So I started off. The first time I was a serious team coach was at North Shore Gymnastics in Louisiana with
Yeah.
James Guidry, and James was one of those guys who his technical knowledge was really, really deep. He
Hmm.
knew drills. He was a college gymnast himself, and James had a very thoroughly developed philosophy. He thought that everything athletes did had to be self motivated,
Hmm.
and it took him out of the role of being the motivator slash punisher for not doing what kids wanted to, what the assignment was. And there were many days when I was like, oh man, like, well, James, if you just, come on, let's go, make them do the assignment. Let's get to, and he would never do, he never stepped over that line. And
Hmm.
it really helped me.
And had good high level athletes
Oh
on
yeah,
top of
no,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, but what developed was kids wanted to do it.
Yeah.
There was nobody forcing you to do it, so you had to make your own goals. And from that point on, I struggled with not wanting it more than the kids, but I always knew my best kids were the kids who I let learn to want it more than I wanted it for
So I
them.
want to come back
Yeah.
to this thought because you've got a great point I want to let you make, but I want to interrupt. And I want to interrupt and say when I was learning to coach, I worked at a gym that had a coach where we had several junior elites that we were a happening gym and these guys were good. And parents had to observe from upstairs. And I remember one of the junior elites kept missing her Jaeger. And he put his arm around her and had a smile on his face and with this tone and this expression says to her, "You're a stupid effing idiot.
Yeah.
I need you to go stand under that straps bar and say out loud 100 times, 'I'm a stupid
Hmm.
idiot.' And when you're done, come back and let's see if we can catch that Jaeger." Well, I'm watching this. I'm a young kid. I'm in college. I see how great these guys are at gymnastics, and I'm equating mental abuse with great gymnastics because
Yeah.
this is what I see. How fortunate are you? So,
Yeah.
having said that, Brian, I want you to get on a soapbox right now
Yeah.
and say to the Ken Harrises, the young Ken Harrises of the world, who either don't have a mentor at all or had one that I was looking at versus the one you were looking at, what do these guys need to know about really coaching and having great
Yeah.
gymnastics?
Well, I think it's so important that a young coach starts having some sort of mentorship to tell them that be patient, let the athlete develop. We call it priming the pump. You just keep a little bit more positivity, a little bit more drills. But what happens when a coach is not prepared to take a kid through a problem is eventually that coach is going to snap. And when you snap, you holler at the kid, you say something in a very personal, nasty way, you do something to get a shock value out of that athlete. And these kids love us. These kids are people
Mm.
pleaser perfectionists. So when we reach for that shock value, we get it, and it drives them as talented athletes to find a way to solve that problem themselves. So two things have just happened though. One, we start to identify our success with being aggressively abusive, saying loud things, saying nasty things,
Yep.
because that's what it takes. The hotter the fire, the harder the steel. How hot can I make this relationship to get this kid to be tough enough to do this? Unfortunately, the flip side is that your legacy is a legacy of kids saying, I might have been good, but I hated every second with you.
Yeah.
And then there's an even deeper side to that is kids start to think, I'm no good. Look what he has to say and do to me. I'm not worthy. And we start tearing kids
Yeah,
down at
Brian.
such an early young age. Can an 8, 9, or a 10-year-old really understand what a high level commitment is?
No.
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 So we can take advantage of that and we can be overly aggressive. And at that point, those kids are so easy to be manipulated. And now we see the negative effects of that. And look, Ken, I'm going to tell you, that's how we were all told to
Yeah.
coach.
Yeah.
Starting from me as an athlete in the 70s,
Yep.
in every sport I played, all the way until, Safe Sport basically said everything coming out of our mouths was abusive. That's what we were told to do. So now it feels threatening, it feels scary. It feels like, my gosh, everything that I've done my whole life has been unvalidated. But the reality is we have to be the generation of coaches that says, okay, let's see if we can now do this better. Let's see if the next group of coaches that are watching us come up, let's see if they can say, hey, this kid balking, I don't need to holler and scream at her and make
Nope.
her even more negative. Maybe I can be more patient or more positive. And at some point in time,
And Brian, there's somebody listen. There's a young Ken Harris out there listening that is skeptical right now, and I want to say, in my career, I never qualified somebody elite until after I learned that lesson. Right? I am here to tell anybody that'll listen, and I know you value this. I was a better coach without the garbage. It takes a little longer to get through the kids.
Yep.
But when it takes with the kids, it's more permanent. It's so
absolutely.
much more permanent. There's no damage they're undamaged doing whatever they're doing, which means they're doing it stronger. And
Yeah.
and you're living proof of that. And the later years of my coaching are living proof of that.
Well, I'll jump in.
Please.
You know, the repercussions of this have echoed through our sport.
Yes.
We're not going to leave a legacy for generations of kids and coaches until we start to be willing to try to do it better. And I, every young coach needs to know what you just said. You really get better when instead of hollering and screaming,
Yep.
you find a technical solution, you
Yep.
find a drill, you kill that problem with praise. You kill that problem with turns that are technically good with conditioning and confidence in that athlete.
And if you're in a place where you're incapable of killing it with praise, as you said, I even think that's okay. But what you do is you walk away. You
Yeah.
you got a skill and the kid's not getting it right and whatever, and you can't think of something praiseworthy to move her out of this. That's all right. Walk away. Say, hey, you know what? We've had enough turns on this today. I'm going to do some more research. I'm going to hit YouTube. I'm going to
Yep.
call a friend. And tomorrow we'll come back at this with a new perspective. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yep. So when you start that, now you've shown some maturity. Tomorrow you come back.
Don't
and
go
you
telling
start,
people that I've shown any maturity. They all know better.
but you start the process of healing that relationship. You start the process of
Yes.
not
She
tearing that kid
trusts
down.
you.
Right.
Yes.
And you can go so far with that. But then the flip side is 6 months later, you snap again and you undo it. So the
Mm.
reality is every kid that's struggling, they create that positive path to getting through that problem. When you snap, you bring them back to the beginning again. So there's so many repercussions to where if we can just be the positive coaches that don't allow our emotions to become in charge. You can't
Mm.
coach a kid's emotions. Well, you can't coach while you're emotional.
Yeah.
Like so the reality is you can be logical and you can be the most thoughtful and caring coach you can be, but you can also destroy as much as you build.
Mm. Preach, brother. Preach.
Not you and I preaching, come on.
Well, mostly you. I had to be preached at in my career to get to that point where I understood this, and thankfully, I did get to a point. So, you're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. How would you like to have Tom Forrester or Mary Lee Tracy for one-on-one private sessions as your team mentor? Check out the Iron Business Solutions Gold Medal Team Package on the web for more information. Link in the description. All right, let's move on from sort of this technical coaching and whatever, and let's move into sort of a gym ownership part of this conversation. Take us through you getting into gym ownership, and don't leave out the split from North Shore because I believe you handled that what I would call the right way. So talk to us, buddy.
Um, as a young coach, I got married, and all of a sudden, there's two people making decisions, and there's different financial obligations. So I was a very successful coach at North Shore. We had one of the largest programs in the nation, 15, 1,600 kids, and elites and level 10s every year at nationals. And so my wife decided to go to medical school in Houston, and so we sold our house and moved to Houston. And while we were there, my wife got pregnant, and we decided to
She
move back to
got pregnant, Brian. Let's be honest. You got her pregnant.
Hey, it's a partnership.
Right.
All the fun's trying.
I just
but,
keep saying, man, it's all your fault, Jennifer. You're hot. I can't keep my hands off you.
Yes, indeed. So in the process of us deciding to move back, I called North Shore back, and I said, I'd like my old job back. And a lady, brilliant lady, good businesswoman, her name's Susan Summer. She said, I don't want to hire you back. I want to offer you a partnership.
Wow.
And it shocked me. I didn't know what to say. Uh,
Yes, you say yes.
yeah, I did, and I learned so much from her about the business side of it because we all know where passion is for coaching. We know passion for being the coach that makes a difference, but the passion for being a business owner, that's completely different. That was a fear for me. That was the other side
Mm,
of where I was good. And but at some point, Susan and it was a three-way partnership. I owned a third of the business. The other two partners owned two-thirds of the business and 100% of the property and building.
okay.
And so at some point, they decided that I was putting too much energy into team, spending too much money on team staff, and they wanted to go in a different direction. So it was probably one of the darkest days of my life. It was pretty depressing. It shook me, but I sold my share of the business back to them, and God bless my wife. There's blessings in
Yep.
life
Yep.
that you don't really know at the time, but God took me and my family, and He put the gym that I own now in front of us. It was the gym that I attended as a kid.
Which was how far away from North Shore?
40 miles, 45
40
miles. Yeah,
miles. So
um,
you didn't go the route of, well, I'm going to be spiteful and teach these guys a lesson, and I'm going to open a gym, and I'm going to take these team kids, and I'm going to maybe even ask the team kids' parents to fund.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I went and I bought an existing gym that was at a very low point. And my wife was very angry with me at the time. Why don't we just open our own for much less money? We can rent a place and open our own instead of buying this gym. But I felt like the lady that had owned this gym had poured into me as a young athlete, and it was the right thing to do to buy her gym. And so I bought M&M Gymnastics at the time. I rebranded it, renamed it as
Just turned
Cypress
it upside
Point.
down, and you named
Yeah.
it W&W. Save
No.
money on signs, man.
I'll tell you what, it
See, you
was
should have hired Iron Business Consulting
there
back then.
you
I would
go.
have said, listen, you're spending way too much on signage. You want to change the name? Turn the sign upside down.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And the little M&M guy on the sign would have been doing a headstand.
Yeah, which is
There
gymnastics,
you
right? There we go.
Anyway, no, those
Anyway, he says.
those decisions allowed what? They allowed me to quit being a high performance, pushing, homeschooled, coaching from 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, picking kids up till 9:15 at night when the last tumbling
Hmm.
class left. and it allowed me to be a husband and a father. And
Mm,
it was absolutely God moving me in a way. And God usually has to um, do something to get our attention. He doesn't tap
yeah.
you on the shoulder and you listen. Usually he has to get your attention. But God moved me to that place at that time. My dad was diagnosed with a rare form of muscular dystrophy, and everything from that point on, when I honored God and followed His
Mm,
lead, has been a blessing for our family. I immediately became a better father to my children and a husband to my
mm.
wife. So hard times. It worked out for the best, and I have now. They say that forgiveness is when you really heal. Well, three years after I sold that gym and all the pain that was associated with it, I finally forgave them and moved on. And from that point on, have been the happiest business owner that I ever dreamed of being.
Man, that is awesome. I'm so happy for you. My story, right way, if you want to call it that, was I worked for Tim Richards at Let It Shine for 6 years, and the very first day I walked in there, I was honest with him and said, one day I want to open my own gym, and I remember it like it was yesterday. He put his arm on my shoulder and said, "Listen, if you'll agree to open 30 miles away from where I am. I'll teach you everything I know." And this was in the early 90s, and this guy had a program that had 1,200 kids. Nobody had 1,200 kids in their program in the early 90s. So I thought, if this guy's going to teach me his secrets, like, I'm going to pay it. I'm going to take notes here. And sure enough, um, 6 years later, when we opened our own gym, our gyms are 35 miles door to door. Tim and I still have a very close relationship. In fact, he had horses years before I did. And so I used to take my daughter when she was little all the way to Tim's house to ride horses, and my daughter thought of him as Uncle Tim when she talked about him. So we still have a terrific relationship, and he was kind enough to do that. So, all right, so let's step away from the gym ownership for just a second. We're going to come back to it because I want to talk about where you are with ownership right now, which I think is really cool. And let's talk about what your most recent gymnastics endeavor is. Let's talk about NGA. Tell us first, how did you become involved in NGA in the first place?
Hmm. I guess everything always has a very twisted path. I
Well, with
was,
you, it does.
yeah, for sure, definitely. Um, I I took a few athletes through the elite program, and all three of them specifically had different interactions with Larry Nassar in that situation,
Mm,
and it hit me in a way that I was pretty bitter. I always wanted the kids that I coached to value the journey, and I felt like that was someone else taking the joy out of the journey and potentially, everything I worked for not being a joyful experience for those athletes, and so in that frame of mind, I saw something about a new organization and just click the info button on it, and uh, I guess a couple hours later, I get a phone call, and it was Linda Barkley, who is the president of the NGA, and she said, "Man, you know, you're the guy I'm looking for." And I was like, "Well, this is scary. What are you looking for? You want to go fishing? Well, what's going on?"
oh, you had me at fishing.
Yeah, and she said, "No, I want to offer you, the women's program director position."
It
And
was because you offered to take her fishing, I'm sure. I
yeah,
mean, that's what I would.
there you go.
Brian's like, "Hey, Ken, you want a job?" "Not really. I'll take you fishing." I'm in.
September, October. Yeah, so I turned her down and
I
went
didn't realize that. I didn't know that
yeah,
you had turned her down.
yeah, went on about the regular business. I defined my success and that's a lifelong habit of defining our success by level 8s to regionals, level 9s to
Yeah.
easterns, and level 10s to nationals.
Yep.
You know, I, I didn't want to take a chance and have to redefine myself at
Hmm.
the age of whatever, right at 50. And I think she called back and we talked and talked and finally
She bought
I
you a new rod and reel combo, and you said, "All right."
Daiwa Steez. No, no.
That set her back,
For those that don't know,
right?
um,
That's a $500 reel, not
yeah,
never mind the rod.
no, but eventually it did start to make sense to me to do exactly what I was afraid of, and that was to define my success differently. And through the talks with Linda, I found out that she wanted the NGA to allow all athletes to go to nationals And I thought to myself of how many
Think how
kids.
successful you'd be then.
Yes. And thought, like, how many times have you the little level 9 you told me about that state meet was her last meet.
Yeah.
I've had that conversation, and it breaks your heart because we don't coach a kid for 2 years. We don't coach a kid for 4 years of high school. We coach a kid for 10, 12, 13,
Mhm.
14 years.
Mhm.
So when that journey comes to an end, and it comes to an end without meeting that kid's goal, man, that is painful. It's always been painful
Mm.
for me.
Mhm.
So I said, like, I don't know. This may or may not be the right decision, but just on the fact that now I can take more kids and I can have their journey end with nationals, they can define their success in a way that says, I made it this year. I accomplished my goals. And honest to goodness, I was willing to take that chance. It was a chance at the time that has been blessed in more ways. I've made so all of my good friends in the world before the day I took that job were USAG professionals, or people I respected, or people I loved. Still consider them, everybody in that organization, my very best friends. But I've broadened and I've got new friends. All I can walk into gyms all over California now, and I have true friends, people who think like me, who say, "Hey, I really want to be more positive with my kids. I really want to take my club into your program." And it was just a wonderful journey. It was a journey that there were times when I felt like I was being persecuted, for misunderstandings. There were things that happened that weren't exactly the way it should have happened. But it has honestly been a journey that has been amazing for me on a professional level. It's been amazing for me. God blessed us, financially whenever we took that step. And then the NGA itself has grown. We started out the first year at the end of the first season with 4,000 kids. We're probably close to 20,000 athletes this year.
Wow.
So it's definitely,
Well, so then tell us a little bit about who and what NGA is. What do
yeah.
we got going on?
Well, it's a lot now. It's growing. So Linda Barkley, Bob Neat, president and vice president, they had the original idea of providing an alternative league. So there was never the goal for them to be anything other than an alternative league, but they thought there was a need for it. I came on board and I brought my version of what I thought that alternative league should look like. Linda is one of those people who is one of the most organized, thoughtful
Hmm.
people. If you tell her you want to run a great championship meet, she's going to get every box checked. And then Bob is the creative genius. Like, if you've ever been to one of our nationals last year was the probably best decorated, best put on gymnastics meet I've ever been
Where
anywhere
was it
around
last year?
New Orleans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of
Oh,
course you think that, Homer.
I can tell you, like, there were floor stickers, NGA national championships, 12 by 12 floor stickers with the logos, kids laying on them.
Yeah,
It was
nice.
just so many things that came together. And it showed the progress that we've made from year one to year three, and now going into year four, going to Anaheim for nationals. We are a program that has 14 optional levels. We have our Excel based levels: bronze, silver, gold, platinum,
So
diamond.
really quick, so we don't bore everybody out there in the audience. In gymnastics, typically, at least for USA Gymnastics, we have two types of levels. The lower levels, 1 through 5, are called compulsory, and what that means is that everybody has to do the same routine and then gets judged out of a 10 based on the mistakes they make in the routine. And then optional in USA Gymnastics is level 6 through 10, where you get to make up your own routines with certain parameters and special requirements. And then you build your score up to a 10 based on meeting those special requirements and then lose points for mistakes made.
Yeah.
And in NGA, you're saying everything is optional. There
Every
are no compulsory
Yes,
routines.
everything is optional. You have four major requirements on each level for each event. But other than that, you make up your own routines. And I really think that there are positives and negatives to that. We all know that having to perfect a compulsory routine creates a level of discipline and a level of execution that not many people that just start optionals in the very beginning. But also, being creative, letting each kid have their own expression at an earlier age keeps more kids involved. So there's a good and a bad, just like in everything.
Sure.
Um, I, the fear is that you're going to miss a little bit in execution, but the reality is we built the NGA around the college code, so our level 10 rules are the exact same rules as the NCAA code. I think just about every one of our level 10s have signed a scholarship since year two.
Wow.
You know, so we had our first athlete who
How
had
many level 10s did you have at nationals last year, for example?
probably 50.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are definitely building our own kids. You know, we're not looking. So we expect that right now the bulk of our numbers are in levels 4, 5, and 6. So we expect those level sixes in 3 years to be nines and tens. 4 years we expect to have our second generation. So we are looking to grow one group of kids at a time into the future of the NGA.
Mm.
You know, so that's kind of where we're at. We do nationals every year as a kind of an educational meet. It's always at a pretty nice destination. This year it's in Anaheim.
Bro, we talked about this at lunch, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox for 20 minutes like I did at lunch, but USA Gymnastics, which I love and my clubs all participate in, drives me nuts. Every cheerleader in the history of the universe of cheerleaders is a world champion because all you got to do to get a bid is send in a video and write a check. And then the divisions are so small, everybody's some kind of world champion. So every cheerleader mom gets to say, my kid made nationals, my kid made worlds, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, if you do gymnastics, your first opportunity to go to nationals is level 9. And by the way, it's only half the nation, Eastern nationals and Western nationals. So you did years and years and years to get some pretty legit gymnastics going before you even have an opportunity to qualify. And what you have to do is go to your state meet and get a qualifying score to your regional championship, so they thin everybody out. Then at regionals, you have to be in the top percentage to get qualified to nationals. They thin everybody out. Then you may show up and the level 9 Eastern Championships are in Dayton, Ohio. Like, hey, everybody, you know what we get to do here? Look at the world's biggest cornflake or the snow piled up on the ground in May in East Lansing, Michigan. Come on, USA Gymnastics, help me out. Let's put level 9 and level 10 national championships in at least a destination spot from now on. All right, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead, Brian, you're up. This is your episode.
Well, I am one of those guys that used to love going to nationals when it was in like Orlando or somewhere.
Yeah, right.
We all had the little things, you know. I can remember every year if it was a beach location for nationals, I'd rent a big convertible and I'd take all my kids back and forth to the meets in the convertible. You know, like we had those special things, you know. But like you say, when it's in Lansing, you probably
Bring your parka, kids.
Yeah. But honestly, you know, there's not a situation between the NGA and USAG like people assume. We are a very happy organization. We're very family oriented, and we are not looking to be something different.
Sure.
You know,
And I want to say for the record too, like I have observed this, and I was when we were bringing up those two elites, it was right after, it was post the Nassar explosion when everybody was fired and everything. And I'm here to tell anybody that's watching that there have been significant positive changes made at USA Gymnastics. So we're not by any means sitting here saying, oh, USA Gymnastics is bad or whatever. But we talked earlier too about preferences, right? And like some people like chocolate ice cream and some people like vanilla. And now there's an option.
Yeah.
Now there's an option.
We have been able to retain team athletes for clubs. So one of the things is when after nationals, and our nationals is in June, that means you have to train longer. That means kids have to go through the end of the school year, and you know, like it's a lot of you know, it changes your whole philosophy. But the reality is, parents go to a summer vacation and then they come home, and the rest of the summer they're bragging to everybody in the neighborhood, my baby went to nationals. And it has allowed us to retain. We go to the end of the summer and everybody's team has retained everybody from last season and then grown new. So we are probably up 20% as far
Because
as
all
team.
14 levels can qualify to
Yep.
nationals, and the qualification is based simply on participation.
Yep. Probably my favorite experience at nationals is I'm the guy I usually call awards, then I get to call out. We have our own top 20 national team from like level 4 and up. And you would think level 4 national team. When you call out a level 4 and you say the NGA national team or developmental team, we have the developmental team. Um, it is the most emotional, exciting thing for parents.
Hmm.
So it really has turned itself into it's our own program. It's promoting positive gymnastics and positive coaching, and we are now developing our own kids in a great
Have
way.
you guys thought far enough ahead to say, hey, what happens when our what did you say? You have 20,000 members worldwide. What happens when that becomes 40,000 and 20 of those thousand want to come to nationals?
Yeah. So yes, at this point, you would not believe the requirements that we have. There's only 7 or 8 places in the entire United States where we can get the square footprint that we want to host the meet.
Is any of them Dayton, Ohio, or East
No.
Lansing? Oh, well, then I'm out.
But right now we go in and we set up 3 women's Capital Cup gyms, and then a men's gym, and then a practice gym. So we're running a gigantic event. So the idea will be at some point in time the lower levels split out, and we can then start having Easterns and Westerns, and then have 3,000 kids between level
Got
6
it.
and level 10, or whatever.
And I made a lot of jokes at the expense of Dayton, Ohio, and East Lansing, where they literally did have some national championships.
Yeah.
And the people that ran the meets ran great meets. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
My kids had a good time, that they felt good and whatever. But just I, as a coach,
Yeah.
was like, well, what am I going to do here? Like
Well,
after coaching,
and you want it to be a reward for the
yeah,
families of the
yeah, good
athletes,
point,
and
good point, good point.
so
Hey, let's talk perils, privileges, and profits of gym ownership. And for me, it's a lot different now. But I remember many times in the first 15 years, good friends couldn't understand why I was so tied to the gym. In fact, I told you the story at lunch that one time I had a group of friends from Indiana, where I went to college, drove through Nashville on their way to Mardi Gras in New Orleans, and they're pounding on my door going, "Come on, Ken, get in the car. We're going to New Orleans for Mardi Gras." I'm like, "Fellas, I own a gym. I gotta go to work." And they're like, "We thought you owned the
mm,
place." Well, we know, especially when you're starting and you own a gym, you're carpenter, electrician, drywall guy, painter, janitor, coach, accountant, you name it. That's your thing. But because I own the place, the buck stops with me. Now, nowadays, gym ownership has evolved for me thanks to some learning some things about business or whatever, where I own all these gyms and I'm almost never in them. I can run them remotely, and it seems like you're at a cool point too, because you're getting to fish a lot. I'm seeing it on Facebook.
yeah.
Talk to us about what's going on there.
Well, you want to think that when you raise your kids in a gym, that it's a relationship that they value. So for me, one of the great things that happened was my daughters came to me and they said, look, Dad, one is already out of college and the other one is graduating this semester, and so we want to buy the gym.
Wow.
And
Wow. You
yeah,
worry when you're raising your kids and they're little gym rats. Are they going to resent the fact that they spend so much time here, or
yeah,
that their parent spends so much time here? And for them to say,
yeah,
"Hey, I'd like to buy this,"
yeah.
means it was special to them. You didn't screw it all up. All right, go on, keep going. Well,
Well,
I didn't mean it like that, but
I,
right.
I'll say this, like, I got a video today or last night while we were sitting down talking, and it was my daughter sending a picture of my granddaughter playing in the gym.
Yeah.
Now everything you did
What's better,
as a
man?
dad is
What's better?
validated. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
like so. But you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the perils. Um, there were many years when you would go from lower level state to upper level state to 3 or 4 different regionals to Easterns and then nationals. And then maybe you would go to an elite qualifier and then to classics and then to maybe championships. And at that point in time, if you had a family at home, your family didn't even know who you were. Like
Yeah.
I can remember coming home from, I think it was Eugene, Oregon. Maybe Nationals was up there, and uh, I walked in the door, and my oldest daughter looked at me and said, "Daddy, do you live at the gym now?" and
Mm.
it just broke my heart, and so there's a lot of perils. I speak to the local colleges. There's just a couple of colleges in our area, and I go speak to the sports administration, sports management students every year.
Yep.
And what you said earlier is exactly what I tell them. Your success in the end may be one thing, but to get started, you have to be the one that vacuums the carpet. You have to be the one that takes the garbages out, because every bit of that, the first 5 years, you're not going to be able to afford to pay
That
somebody.
replaces the toilet,
That's right.
right? And if you back when we were doing it, there was no such thing as YouTube, right? So if you had to set a toilet, you couldn't just watch a video. You had to do it, and then somebody takes a crap in there and then craps all over the floor because you didn't do it right. This may or may not have actually happened to at least one of us here. No need to name names, Brian. Fortunately, and I'm going to be a little funny, but a little true here. One of the reasons we founded Iron Business Solutions when I did is because my gymnastics business had evolved from a mom and pop to a true business.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, I think I can take these principles to anyone and help them get back some really valuable time, some time with their families. Let them be able to afford a plumber so that they don't have to change the
Yep.
toilet themselves. And so with some of the systemization and financial planning and leadership planning that we help these people with,
Yeah.
they eventually get there. You're listening to Stick the Landing podcast by Iron Business Solutions. Do you feel like you're alone and on an island because gymnastics businesses face unique challenges and you're throwing mud at a wall to see what sticks? How would you like to have Ken Harris or Tom Forrester in one-on-one private sessions as your business mentor? Check out the Iron Business Solutions Gold Medal Business Package on the web for more information. Link in the description. All right. So I always like to ask this: what impact did owning this gym have on your marriage? Especially because in your case, it wasn't you and your wife together. Your wife's a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife has had a medical career as long as I can remember, it seems like. Um, I think if you're dating bu- early enough that your wife accepts that your lifestyle is going to be around traveling, and then it's got to be
That
based on.
supper is at 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we were very lucky that my wife understood that from the beginning. When we started dating, I was already coaching. The first year, I did a ton of traveling that year, and she saw what it was from the beginning. And she's a very intelligent woman. I've been blessed with an amazing marriage for 30 years, and the whole time she supported me through it, and I've supported her through her career. And I don't know if it was a specific thing to my marriage as much as it was just it allowed us to both support each other and to grow in our own ways.
Grow
Having
in
to,
our own ways. Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
but the blessings for me were definitely with my daughters. Like owning a gym, it can either be something that tears you and your children apart, or it can be something that brings y'all together. And it allowed me to bring my kids to school, pick my kids up from school when I didn't forget them, and
Which may or may not have happened.
if you
We're not
ask my
saying.
youngest daughter, I did that a couple times. But and then you're coaching them, so you have that relationship with them, and then you bring them home, and then the ride home is when you find out what a jerk you are as a coach.
Hmm.
Now you say, okay, we had a great time bringing you to school this morning. We laughed and cut up. Why, on the ride home, is there this cold silence in the car? You start to figure out, wow, that's a reflection of
Hmm.
how I treated my children at practice
Wow.
tonight. So at some point in time, I think every one of us should coach our own child and have that ride home after she balked as a level 7 on beam for 3 nights in a row. And dad walked away from bars to go to beam to make sure she did her series.
Yikes.
Yeah. And I really think there is a little bit of something in that car ride home and in supper that night that for every one of us should be an eye opener. You can still coach your kid, but you have to make that dad's more important than coach decision at that point, or either it becomes a dividing factor in your relationship.
Hmm. Very good. Very good. Owning a gym's had a positive impact on my marriage because my wife did it with me for the first 13 years. So we dreamed and schemed. This was both of our dreams. So it was pretty awesome. So we already mentioned that your daughters obviously had a positive impact and they're in the process of buying the gym or have bought the gym
Yeah.
from you. Tell me about what stage that leaves you. Are you involved at all in the day to day? Are you coaching? Are you helping out? What are you doing?
I am the grandpa babysitter.
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. I can wait because my daughter's not married yet. My son's getting married in July, so I want to wait, but I can't wait
Yeah,
to be grandpa.
I am in that.
Pops is what they're gonna call
There
me.
you go.
Pops.
Hey, whatever they call me, as long as they call me.
Oh, yeah,
Like
good attitude.
there is a point in time to when, as long as I'm a part of my grandchildren's life, I'm just happy to be there. And
Mm,
but I the reality is for me, I've been out of the gym long enough that the older kids all know me. I've been out about 9 months now. When I walk in, they're excited to see me and they try to work a little harder. So I can come in and say, "Oh wow, show me that again." And I get this big smile and I get a great effort. And the coaches are like, "Okay, I'm gonna go get a sip of water. You do this for 5 minutes." And then they come back and I'm like, "High five. Y'all are awesome. Can't wait to see y'all
yeah.
compete."
You kinda get to be, grandpa to the gymnasts. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, there is a role also. I talked about being a mentor a lot. There's a role once you step out of the ownership to where you're now a mentor towards your daughter. My daughter says the new owners, but also to every coach in the program. And so you really become a much more comfortable role. You get to tell them the advice that means something to you, and you get to help them through the difficult times without having the day to day things that we outgrew as we got older. The relationship of understanding kids in today's world is something that I felt like I had just kind of outgrown. Like I grew very old and passed up,
Hmm.
lost. And so now that part of it that I was no longer comfortable with, I still get to do the part that I am comfortable with.
Wow. Good for you, man. I'm jealous a little bit.
You're right there.
I am, in the business. I'm jealous of the grandkids. Speaking of the business, when you were in charge, what did you find most challenging about owning a gym from a business
Yeah.
perspective? From a business perspective.
Um, well, I think we all, at some point or another, struggle with employees and stuff like that. We have a college town right there, and I think there was the struggle there, but in the beginning, the real struggle was learning the business. And I knew how to coach gym.
Hmm.
I didn't know that in July, nobody was going to pay tuition because they were all going back to school. I didn't know that in December, tuition payments weren't going to come in because everybody's
Mm.
those kind of things. There was a learning curve that was very stressful.
Time and money management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get a full picture, once you've done your club your way for 3 or 4 years, and you say, okay, if I'm going to do sessions at this, and this time, I'm going to have money come in at this, and this time. All right, that doesn't work for me. I need to change it. I was very comfortable running the business, but the hard times were figuring out how I wanted to run it to get
Sure.
it set up, to,
Sure.
to run itself.
When we go on site and consult, almost every single gym needs a financial plan
Yeah.
of some variety. And it's because I always like to tell the chef story, right? No, somebody opens a restaurant because they cook a great steak, right? And all their friends and all their family say, "This is the best steak ever. You should open a restaurant." And so they go, "Yeah, I'm going to open a restaurant. I'm passionate about cooking. I'm good at it. Let me do it." Well, they don't know how to hire. They don't know how to train. They don't know how to do taxes. They don't know how to manage money,
Yeah.
right? 4 months later, they're out of business. No gymnastics coach goes into business to manage money, but rather to enrich children's lives through the sport of gymnastics. And where we come in at Iron Business Solutions is we help hand them the systems that make the important business things like sort of automatic
Yeah.
for them. I wish a company like Iron Business Solutions existed when I first opened ETC because I could have retired 10 years earlier if I had all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Um, is there a highly sort of gym owner lesson that you really want your daughters to learn from you so that they don't have to endure some of the challenges that you faced? Like, and something that they don't have to learn the hard way because you already did.
I think the first thing is just like when you were an athlete, leave gym at gym. You own the
Mm,
business, and
good
the
advice.
business is going to consume you from the time you walk in to the time you walk out. If you're going home to a family, you have to not let your business consume that time also. So when the door locks behind you, um, yeah, look at the text message about the kid that forgot their book sack at the gym, and go back and do that, because that's good business. But the reality is, let it go enough to give 100% of yourself to your spouse, to your children, to whoever else is in your life.
Hmm.
Let the business be the business, and you have love for life, and you be a happy human being outside of the gym.
Good advice. Mackenzie, Marina, I hope you guys are listening out there. All right. One more sort of business ish question. What do you think are two or three or one or two things in the business that still present themselves as challenging for you?
Um, for me, it was employees.
Mm,
I definitely felt that the nature of what an employee brought to the gym changed in the last 20 years.
sure.
And that was something that I was comfortable with, an employee relationship. When I first opened the gym, here's your list of responsibilities, and there's things that, every night when
Well,
Jim,
it's generational,
yeah,
is what it is. I was speaking at Region 7 Congress and had a session off and attended somebody else's lecture. And what they were talking about was they basically said the differences in generations in the workplace. And they went from the greatest generation, and I don't know if any of them are still in the workplace,
yeah,
all the way to what they call Zoomers or Gen Z. That's the youngest people. And it was so eye opening on what they value.
yeah,
Like, you and I are Gen X. And um, I reckon we don't employ a lot of Gen X people, but we do employ a lot of Gen Y, which are the millennials, and Gen Z, which are the Zoomers. And Gen Y was motivated none at all by money, but they wanted to make a difference in the world. And that difference included in their own lives. They wanted to put up boundaries for like quality time and whatever, but they were more interested in a career path that was impactful rather than financially rewarding.
yeah,
Gen Z, on the other hand, looks at work right now strictly as a means to an end. I'll do whatever job pays the highest, I don't care what it is, so that I can be done with work on Friday, have the weekends to myself, and have money to do the things that I like.
right,
And one of the bizarre things in the study was uh, Gen Y, which is 20 years older than Gen Z, and Gen Z is like our kids' age, right? Gen Z had something like the average Gen Z person has something like $7,600 in their savings account. The average Gen Y has 1,200, almost 5 times or a little bit more than 5 times for people that are 20 years
yeah,
younger. And it's because how we relate to and motivate Gen Y is very different than Gen Z. And I'm Gen X, and my wife laughs. I'm at the age where I'm shaking my fist at birds, and yelling at teenagers for you walking in my grass or playing their rock and roll music too loud. It's not really that bad, but kind of, right?
yeah,
And by the time I got a handle on what Gen Y was doing, the millennials, read enough books, started to understand these people, and adapted to our compensation program at the gym to people of this generation. The next generation started coming in. And now we're seeing that it is all about the money. That people, you couldn't convince a millennial, for example, to go work at McDonald's, even if they were paying $6 an hour more than they were paying at ETC Gymnastics, because at ETC they were impacting a kid's life. Now I got to pay a McDonald's employee $2 an hour more just to get them to come work here. And it's
yep,
like, you'd rather fry fries? And they're like, no, I'd rather do this, but this pays more. And the pay I use to do what I really want
yep.
to do. So,
So our pay scale was adjusted because of the crumble cookie business. There's a chain called Crumble Cookie in Louisiana, and they opened. one, I guess, 2 or 3 miles from the gym, and their starting pay, I think, for untrained people was $14 or $15 an hour, and we were starting $10, $11 an hour, and all of a sudden, all of my employees are like, "We're going to make cookies." So I'm like,
Right?
"Oh, and it really changes, like you said, like you have to start. You don't compensate people by. Um, we used to do things like I put a $15 gas card or something in their locker. No, it's strictly just
Put it on the paycheck.
yep,
That's
put it
what
on
we
the
want.
paycheck.
Yep. If you need a hand in building your business or building your team program, Iron Business Solutions has a great number of cost effective tools. We can help you avoid some of these pitfalls. We can help you find a healthy work life balance so that you and your family can feel like they're a priority in your lives. And we can help you get your team program to the next level. Visit us on the web or find us on social media. We've got Mary Lee Tracy, Tom Forster, and Ken Harris at your disposal. So, Brian, all right, let's close out with some fun. I like the time machine questions. First one is, if you could go back in time and undo any one decision that you've made in your life, what decision would that be?
Um, I've thought about this a little bit, and I think there was one stage as a coach when I made poor decisions. I had a parent basically threaten me.
Only one?
Well,
Good
well,
Lord.
right,
My whole career is littered with stages of poor
but
decisions.
I guess this one stands out above the rest, maybe to put it more accurately. But I had a parent threaten me that if you don't get my daughter out of this tops team into the elite program within a certain amount of time, we're going to take her to another gym. And I allowed that threat to make me a coach that I was uncomfortable with. I was not the
Mm,
same coach that I was enjoyed being. My actions made me miserable every day, even if it made that athlete a better athlete. And I did that for about 3 months. And I have looked back at that 3 months and said everything that I value now, I didn't do at that time.
hmm.
And it really was a negative for me as a human being. It was a negative for me as a coach. The parents took the kid to the other gym anyway. The other gym hollered, screamed, and cussed at her. She quit either anyway. So, I feel like there are times when if there was that one thing, I would have been more patient in doing things the way that I believe they were supposed to be done.
She
And
still would have left, but
she,
you would have felt
I,
good about yourself.
I wouldn't have made myself a miserable human being.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, second time machine question. If you could go back in time and offer any one piece of advice to a young Coach Brian Neal, what would that advice be?
Um, I, you know, more patient with problems.
Hmm.
If it's a problem with a peer, be patient. They're just passing through this job just like you are. It doesn't have to be something that basically makes you lay there miserable trying to find a solution at 2 in the morning. If it's an athlete, that kid should leave your gym not feeling like he hollered and screamed at me and I balked, but she should leave your gym thinking, hey, I had a problem, but you know what? He was right there trying to help me figure it out to the very end. So if there was something that I would like to be able to go back, or it would definitely be that just be patient when you find
Mm.
yourself with anxiety, when you find yourself with frustration, and trust what you've done and to get there because it was the right thing.
Wow. All right. I ask my guests for a book recommendation. Got one?
Yeah, well, probably for me, definitely the Bible.
The Bible.
Yeah,
Nice. Good call.
I, I, I feel like most of the lessons in life were answered 2,000 years ago.
Hmm.
Like it's a big book, and to read it is definitely not something you sit down and do in your spare time. It has to be something from your heart that you want to accomplish, to learn, to be a better person from. But I, it's going to make your inner joy. Joy is a word I use a lot. The kids used to always ask me, "What is joy?" So, well, joy is being happy in bad times or good times. Joy is that thing that's inside of you that's happy no matter what. And I don't think you ever have that in your life until you get that relationship. So.
I have two book recommendations, and they're both by the same author. I did this last month too, and both of Tony Dungy's books, Uncommon and Quiet Strength, are out of this world. Again, he's a solid Christian, and he's been through a bunch and done a lot. And like this guy, I think believes about coaching grown men the way we believe about
Yeah.
coaching girls. So I recommend those strongly. Brian, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show today. Good luck to your daughters as they move forward with the purchase. Good luck to NGA as they wrap up their season. And good luck to you out on the water catching some really fat, but in the slot, redfish.
Come on, man. I'm waiting for you to come catch them with
I'm
me.
coming in the fall. As usual, people, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or email me at kenharris.ironbusiness@gmail.com. Until the next episode of Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions, I'm Ken Harris with Iron Business Solutions, and we'll have stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your business. See you next month. Hey, if you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media and leave us a review. Links in the description.